Palmer had been watching all the fluffy snow that was layered on top of every house and car on her way back from the store. She carried with her the last of the decorations she would put on the tree. She was only a few minutes away from home. The sound of slush filled her ears. Everyone was hurrying back home to be with their families on Christmas Eve. Palmer opened the gates to her house. It brushed along the naked tree that was covered in powdery snow. There was a shower of glistening icicles that broke off the branches. She looked at her front yard, the snowman she and her sister had made just the other day. The head of the snowman was toppled over, and it seemed like someone had been stepping around in the piled-up snow. As much as Palmer wanted to step around in the snow herself and make some snow angels, she quickly searched for the keys in her jacket pocket with her numb fingers. The air was so frigid and nippy, it was difficult breathing the bitter cold air outside. She was anxious to open the door and watch the fireplace light up with orange flames. Palmer got inside and warmed up to the sound of the fire crackling and the sweet aroma of burning wood. Palmer lived in a small, cozy house with her elder sister Julia and her husband, Peter. She was the first to be back home. The house was quiet. She saw someone had left a message on the answering machine. It was her sister. Palmer, I'm going to be home a little late. I got the most beautiful ornament ever. It's going to make the tree glow. But the line here is so long. I don't know how long it will take. See you soon. Make me and Peter some hot cocoa. Bye. Palmer took out all the lovely things she had bought at the shop and started decorating the branches of their tree. After placing the glimmering golden star on the top of the Christmas tree, she sat back, put up her fuzzy socked feet on the table and turned on the TV. Suddenly, the bell rang. She hopped up, expecting to open the door to her sister. She tiptoed and placed her eye in front of the peephole. It was blocked. Someone was covering it. It was probably her sister then. She was about to open the door when she heard a cough. She realized it didn't sound like her sister anymore. It didn't sound like Peter either. She looked again to find a woman poking her head at the door. A big smile was spread across her face almost from ear to ear. At first, Palmer couldn't figure who this woman was, but as she stepped back a little, Palmer realized it was the woman from next door. Palmer, how are you? Just dropped by to give you these freshly baked cookies. Thank you, Mrs. Benson. No problem, dear. I'm heading on out to go upstate for the weekend. Let your sister know, all right? The house is going to be empty. I hope you guys wouldn't mind keeping an eye out for intruders. Sure, Mrs. Benson, don't worry about it. Mrs. Benson gave a big smile and left. The neighborhood Palmer lived in was a rather good neighborhood. The crime rate wasn't too high, and the people were kind. Just around Christmas time, though, most of the people would be gone home to spend the holidays with their relatives in the countryside. So you could say the neighborhood would be almost deserted. All these years, Palmer, Julia, and Peter had been living in this neighborhood, and they always spent Christmas right at home. Palmer had never heard of any burglary or robbery occurring anywhere nearby, or at least to her. Palmer didn't give a second thought to intruders. She sat back down with a blanket and waited. The clock was ticking. It was nearly an hour, but Julia and Peter hadn't returned, and Palmer was getting bored waiting for them. Just then, she heard a scratching noise at the front door. She turned down the television and listened closely. Was it Julia with her shopping bags? There was an eerie silence. Palmer got up to check the peephole. She looked through, and to her surprise, she saw a man standing outside. He was of a large build, rather fat. He wore a red suit with a fluffy white trim. Palmer looked closely at his face. She felt a little uncomfortable because it looked as if he was staring right back at her. He had a red hat slopped on his head and a dirty gray beard that hung down to his chest. Suddenly, a loud knock shocked Palmer. She jumped back and toppled over a flower vase. Palmer shrugged. Damn, now he knows I'm here. The man knocked on the door loudly. Nervously, Palmer spoke out. Who's there? The man replied, Why, don't you recognize me? It's Santa Claus, dear. I'm cold and my belly is rumbling. Won't you let me in? Chills went down Palmer's spine. She knew this creep was no Santa Claus. She loudly spoke. Please leave. Palmer thought the strange man had left. She peered through the peephole, only to find the man's eyes red, filled with anger. His face twisted into a grimace of hate as he paced front and back. He began knocking on the door even harder this time. Palmer, it's Santa Claus. I can smell those delicious cookies from out here. Let me in and pour me a cup of hot milk, won't you, Palmer? Palmer had a sinking feeling in her stomach. Her heartbeat raised and she began to shake. How did this man know her name? The man began rattling the doorknob. Palmer peeked out one last time. She saw the man shuffling his pocket. He took out something. Looked like he was trying to pry the door open. If you don't leave now, I'll call the police. All of a sudden, the knocking stopped. The doorknob was motionless. Palmer was too afraid to look into the peephole another time. She quickly grabbed the phone and called up her sister. Julia, there's a man at the door. He's trying to barge in. I'm scared. Julia, what am I supposed to do? What? Make sure the door is properly locked. Push the cupboard in front of it and hide. I'll be home with the police as soon as I can. Palmer hurried to push the cupboard in front of the door. Halfway across the door, there was a loud bang. The wall was shaking as the man was trying to smash down her front door. Palmer didn't hesitate a second longer. With all her might, she pushed the cupboard covering the door and ran into her bedroom, where she hid in the closet. Crouched behind the coats in the darkness of the small closet, Palmer was frightened to her core. Her shirt was becoming wet as tears rolled down her cheek. Sweat trickled down Palmer's face. Every move she made her more terrified of being caught. She tried to stay as still as she could. She tried to breathe as quietly as she could. But she was so horrified imagining what would happen. She jammed her fist into her mouth to stifle the urge to scream out for help. She could hear the loud cracking sound of the front door breaking apart. She heard all the glassware fall to the floor from the cupboard. The man was in. He was inside the house, only a few steps away from Palmer. She heard him calling out, Palmer, my sweet girl, where are you hiding? Don't you want to see what I've brought in my sack? Who was this man? What did he want? Never in Palmer's life had she seen a psycho like him. Palmer peeked out the small opening of the closet door. She had forgotten to lock the bedroom door. From where she was, she could see out into the hallway, all the way to the kitchen. There was no one in sight, but Palmer's heart was pounding. She held her mouth as her teeth began to chatter from the shivering. She then saw something. It was that man in the red suit. He opened up the fridge and began hurling the food everywhere as he stuffed some into his mouth. What was wrong with him? Palmer was sure this wasn't any sane person. The madman turned around. Palmer could see him walk down the hall. There was food in his beard, and his suit was drenched wet. She heard him yelling out in a loud, booming voice. You've left gingerbread, sugar cookies, and chocolate chip. A glass of milk. Palmer, I've drank every drop and drip. Now come out, wherever you are. My big heart can sense you're not too far. The intruder stomped down the hall with his heavy boots. Palmer tried to hide as far into the closet as she could. She couldn't bear the horror anymore. Palmer could hear him pacing down the hallway. She trembled thinking of what would happen if he found her. Palmer, I know you're here. Palmer heard the man only a few feet away from her. Suddenly, the handle of the closet door turned slowly, and light poured into the dark space. The man began to laugh menacingly. Palmer got a wire hanger ready in her hand as she waited. Her eyes were wide and her hands trembling. The man tore the closet door off the hinges and thrust his head through the coats. Palmer was face to face to a drooling madman. The man threw his hands through the coats and grabbed Palmer by the neck. Palmer kicked her legs and tried to pull herself free, but she was no match to this huge, crazy man. She screamed as loud as she could. She wished if someone could hear her. But then she remembered, even the neighbors were out of town. There was no one near to save her, no one to hear her cry for help. Gasping and choking from the tight grip of the man's huge, gnarled hands, everything began to go dark in front of Palmer's eyes. All Palmer could think of at this moment of despair and hopelessness was to cry out for mercy. Mercy from an insane, psychotic, unstable man. His mouth twisted into a grotesque smile, and he whispered to Palmer, "Tonight is the big night. I'm tired and I'm hungry after that long flight. I've got a list and I've checked it twice, and I'm here to decide if you've been naughty or nice. You can scream and beg for your life, but it seems all you'll get tonight is a sharp old knife." Julia and Peter arrived with the police about 20 minutes from when Palmer called. When they got there, they found the front door open, hacked to pieces. There was glass broken all over the floor. The refrigerator was emptied out and food was scattered all over, on the walls and on the ceiling. Gazing around in the carnage, Julia called out, "Palmer, where are you? We're here with the police. You're safe now." It was silent. Palmer was nowhere to be found. The police searched the house and there was no one. Julia sat down on the couch next to the tree that Palmer had decorated. She held her face and cried as Peter tried to console her. "I was too late, Peter. I lost her." And then there was a sound. It sounded like one of the ornaments fell from the tree. Julia circled around the tree. She screamed out in absolute horror when she saw the ornaments. Ornaments of Palmer's fingers, hanging from the tree, and written in red on a piece of paper. "You were a bit too late coming from the store. You should have known Christmas meant a lot more. I stole it all, but now it's time to leave. Now don't be sad on Christmas Eve."